Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Gyan Bhakti channel by Swami Nikhilananda. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, to Ram Parivar, all sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. So we are currently studying the scripture, Mysticism of Ramayana. Commentary is by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanandaji Maharaj, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started in today's satsang. Yesterday we had covered that Sita Mata was how she was born and how she was brought up by King Janaka. And one day when she was cleaning the ancient bow, she lifted it easily with her left hand in order to clean under it, thinking that people had been negligent in letting the dust accumulate. She didn't know that nobody else could lift that bow, it was so heavy. So when King Janaka saw this, he realized the extraordinary nature of Sita and made a declaration that anyone who married Sita must at least possess similar strength. Thus, Dhanusha Yagya, the bow lifting ceremony, was going to be conducted in Janakpur, and suitors from all over the world were coming to try to lift Shiva's mighty bow. And Brahmans and sages were gathering there to perform the religious rituals associated with that sacrifice. Along with all those suitors and sages came Rama, Lakshmana, and sage Vishwamitra, because they were invited by King Janaka. After arriving in Janakpur, Rama and Lakshmana toured the city, enchanting all the citizens with their divine beauty. While picking flowers for puja from the royal gardens of King Janaka, they caught a glimpse of Sita as she passed by with her friends on their way to the temple of goddess Uma. From the first glance, Rama was overwhelmingly drawn to Sita and she to him. So it was love at first sight, although they were Lord Vishnu and Ma Lakshmi. It was clear why so many suitors were trying to win her hand in marriage. When the ceremony was about to begin, sage Vishwamitra, accompanied by Rama and Lakshmana, entered the royal hall in which the bow was kept and where they were given the highest seats in the assembly. Before their eyes, one prince after another came forward and struggled with all his might to lift the bow, but no one could budge it even an inch. Vishwamitra then asked Rama to try his hand at the task. Calmly, Rama stepped forward and lifted the bow, and then with a great cracking sound that reverberated all over the world, he broke the bow into two pieces. Seeing this, Sita adoringly placed the wreath of victory around Rama's neck, and Janaka announced with great joy that the plans for the marriage of these two extraordinary beings should commence. There was great rejoicing everywhere, and all were extremely delighted at the thought of witnessing such a divine marriage. The atmosphere of rejoicing was interrupted, however, by the threats of some of the defeated suitors to fight Rama and Janaka and take Sita away by force. And then to add to the tumult and confusion, into the assembly hall stepped the ferocious Parshuram, swinging his great axe and showing his immense wrath. Parshurama, having heard about the breaking of Lord Shiva's bow, had become incensed. In his mind, breaking the bow was a terrible, irreligious act. Since he was a great devotee of Shiva, he wanted to punish the person who had done it. After a display of temper and wits by Parshurama and Lakshmana, Rama eventually melted Parshuram's anger with words of wisdom and fearlessness. So the guidance is, don't respond to anger with anger. It has to be cooled down. Deeply impressed with this young hero, Parshurama then tested Rama to see if he was indeed an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. He asked Rama to hold Lord Vishnu's bow, and right before his eyes, the bow stretched itself in Rama's hands. Seeing the glory of Rama, Parshurama adored him and then went away to practice austerity in the forest. So this test was very deep, and it does have mystical meanings, which we will cover in the future satsang tomorrow. With all obstructions out of the way, a great marriage festivity was arranged. At that festivity, Rama's three brothers were also to be married to relatives of Sita. So it was decided, why don't all the four brothers get married at the same time? So what a sight that must have been. Two kings marrying their four sons and four daughters. King Janaka had the daughters and King Dashratha had the sons. According to tradition, King Dashratha, along with all the relatives and friends of the grooms, formed a huge marriage procession and came to Janakpuri, where Sita and the other brides were waiting. At the auspicious moment they had been selected by Brahma, the creator himself, the marriage ceremony was performed with all great spiritual as well as material grandeur. So all the proper observances were performed. Just as in ancient times King Himavant had given away his daughter Uma to Shiva, and the spirit of the ocean had given away Lakshmi to Vishnu, in the same manner King Janaka gave Sita to Rama and brought new glory and harmony to the world. So the story of the birth of Sita and the events that occur during Rama's visit to Janakpur have great mystic significance as well as devotional beauty. Sita represents the subtle and sharp intellect that helps one attain self-realization. King Janaka, symbolic of Upanishadic insight, uses the golden plough of reflection and delves deep into the mystic land of the unconscious, and thus he discovers Sita, the intellect that would lead the soul to liberation. This is followed by the reign of Shubhavasanas, formation of auspicious impressions in the unconscious mind. So this is the whole setup of the drought and how King Janaka found Sita, and then the rain came, which means the bhakti fructified. The bow of Shiva represents a subtle illusion in the mind which keeps one glued to the sense of individuality and leads one through endless cycles of birth and death. If one were to break that illusion, he would begin to tread the path of nivritti, the path that leads to liberation. So remember, we've discussed this before. There are two paths. One is the path to pravritti, the other is the path through nivritti. Pravritti keeps us tied to the world process, and nivritti takes us towards liberation. But as long as that illusion is there, one treads the path of pravritti, the path of repeated embodiments. Following pravritti implies that one is trapped in a realm of karma. As a result of performing good karmas, he goes to the heavenly world, Swarga, after death, and as a result of bad karmas, he is led to hellish worlds. All these are also very deeply covered in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita scripture. But then, having exhausted those karmas, he is born in the world again and again. From one life to the next, one remains an individual caught in the realm of Maya, involved in karma. Maya is illusion, because that makes us believe our body is real, our mind is real, our intellect is real. Whereas in reality, it's all a cosmic plan, more like a movie. So following the path of nivritti means that one is performing good karmas in order to purify his heart with the spirit of dedicating it to God, not for acquiring merit for heavenly enjoyments. And that's the difference. When we expect desires to fructify and get lots of material possessions, things, heavens, all that is part of pravritti marg, so we keep coming back. But for attaining liberation, when we go for liberation, then we are taking the path of nivritti, or the path of self-realization. Such action is called karma yoga, selfless service, etc. The moment an aspirant turns into his actions into karma yoga, he is on the way to breaking the cycle of birth and death, because he's destroying the very sense of individuality by which karmas are sustained. And it's like pulling the weeds out by their roots, and therefore it takes time. This is what is called a sadhana, our spiritual practice. So we will be covering more of this in tomorrow's satsang. This is Swami Nikhilanand. Om Tat Sat.